Hello, I'm Kurma and welcome. In this series, we're going to show you how to cook a wide variety of international vegetarian cuisine from over 30 countries. And in this edition, we're going to show you how to prepare the third in a series of 3 Asian meals, this time an Asian-style dinner, consisting of Malaysian hot noodles with tofu, mee goreng, and vegetarian spring rolls. So let's begin. Here's my version of the famous Malay Chinese noodle dish called mee goreng. It's a fabulous combination of noodles and fresh vegetables and 2 different types of tofu. It's a very, very famous dish, and actually this recipe was developed with the association of a good friend of mine, a fellow cook called Harakanta, and we developed this fabulous version, vegetarian version of mee goreng, and it's got some really lovely things in it, and I'd like to show you them straight away. Over here we've got some mee, or Chinese wheat noodles. There's different types you could use. You could use these long thin ones or these curly ones. Either way, they're lovely in this dish and they form the basis of it. They're going to be boiled up and then we're going to wok fry them. Actually, mee means noodles and goreng means fried. So mee goreng means fried noodles. So along with our noodles here, by the way, there's 9 ounces here, or about 250 grams of. We've also got 2 cups of fresh mung bean shoots. We've got 14 ounces or 400 grams of firm tofu cut into half-inch cubes. You notice these are quite firm and they're not the silken variety, and these are much, much superior in the fried noodle dish because we don't want them to fall apart when we wok fry them. We've also got 13 ounces of dried sliced bean curd. You can purchase it in packets like this. It's dried tofu which has been sliced into it's dried tofu that's been sliced into little shapes like this, and this batch here has been soaked for 15 minutes in hot water, becomes very soft. You can slice it up into little cubes, which is what we're going to do. We've got 3 tablespoons of Chinese sesame oil, 3 tablespoons of minced fresh ginger, half a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder, 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, 3 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice. And over here we've got a nice bunch of Chinese vegetable here. This is called choy sum. We're going to use the stem and the leaves, and we're going to cut them up into 1-inch pieces in a little while. There's one other ingredient that we're going to be using, and it's called sambal olik. It's made from crushed red chilies and salt. I'm going to make my own here rather than purchase it in the shop, and without touching this with our fingers because these are pretty hot. These are dried chilies which I've soaked in water for an hour or 2, and I'm now going to take them out and put them in my mortar and pestle and crush them up with salt. There's about 1 teaspoon of salt required for every 4 or 5 chilies. So I've measured out a proper amount of salt here. I'm going to grind up this much salt with this much chilies in our mortar, and I'm going to use about 2 tablespoons of the product for my mee goreng, and the rest I'm going to put away in a jar and use it next time. So the first thing I'm going to do here is to very carefully take out my chilies without touching them too much because they're rather hot. I guess this water I could use for something if I wanted to heat up the dish. Let me put my mortar down here. And let me add my salt, and we're going to crush this up to a paste. This stuff's looking pretty good. I need 2 tablespoons of this in my recipe. Wonderful rich chili aroma here wafting out of the bowl here and making my eyes water. Look at that beautiful red rich chili colour. Very nice. Okay, well I'm going to need about 2 tablespoons of that. When the recipe calls for it, I'm going to reach over and grab it, and the rest I'm going to put away in a jar and use for later. And we're going to begin our wonderful noodle dish here by putting on our boiling water for our noodles. So, and while our water comes to the boil, we're going to be chopping up a few things. So let's start by chopping up our choy sum here into nice little 1-inch lengths, the stalk and the leaves. The fresher the better for your vegetables. I always like to select my vegetables personally, going to the market myself and picking out the nicest, freshest ingredients. You'll find many other cooks who are there at the markets doing the very same thing because nothing worse than using yucky, stale vegetables. So there's our lovely plate of fresh Chinese vegetables. Let's pop them over there. And I can hear my water coming to the boil. Won't be long anyway. So we'll take our dry sliced bean curd, which has now been moistened by soaking in hot water, and we're going to cut this up into little squares. I could probably do it all in one go here. Line it all up and slice it up. It's quite easy to cut up when you've soaked it. Then it takes a few seconds, see? And we'll pop them in our bowl over here. You might like to dry them a little bit sometimes if they've been soaking. They're a little damp. You can get a paper towel and dry the little pieces. These ones are quite dry, so no problems at all with them. So now we're going to plunge our wheat noodles into our boiling water. In they go. We'll push them under. Of course, the water's come off the boil there, but it shan't be long. Cook them until you can just break them in half, and they're not too slimy and not too firm, just sort of al dente, if we could use that Italian term in Malay cooking. So while our noodles are boiling, we're going to deep fry our tofu. I took the liberty before of turning on our oil, which is now very hot. In they go, our lovely little chunks of tofu. And as they cook, I'm going to gradually slide them around a little bit so that they all come apart. And these are only going to take a minute or two to cook. A good way of telling when your tofus are done is when they go a sort of a golden colour and they start to swell up. I think these are qualified to come out of the oil now. Have a look. So I'll put down my little slotted spoon, bring out my heavy equipment and give them a little shake and pop them in our colander. With those lovely golden cubes of tofu. While they're draining, let's deep fry our dried tofu pieces here. Notice how when they fry, they swell up. When it gets to that stage, they should be taken out. So I'm going to take my other tofu, transfer it onto our dish, put it aside, and take out our little dried tofu. See how they're swelling up like little balloons? You need to fry your dried tofu in little batches like that. As soon as they all come to the surface and blister, you can take them out. Okay, turn off the oil. Tofu goes in there. Have a look at our noodles, they're ready to go. See our lovely noodles over here, they're looking quite nice. Let's have a test of one. Give it a squeeze. Just right. Okay, let's turn off our flame. Take them over to the sink. In the sink I have a colander sitting, so we can drain our noodles very easily. Like so. Let's rinse them under the cold water. We might use our little spray gun here. Don't get to use my spray gun much. Let's get them all nice and cold and refreshed after their ordeal. It's quite a difficult job boiling around in that pot of hot water. They need a bit of a break, I think. But we've given them a nice cool bath. Let's leave our colander of noodles sitting in our bowl here to drain. And let's continue over here. What I'm going to have to do now is make a bit of a rearrangement. So I'm going to move my wok of hot oil over to the other side of the stove, maybe even off the stove completely, because it's probably going to be a bit dangerous. It's not good working around hot oil. I'm going to bring in my other wok. We're going to finish up our fried noodle dish. So excuse me while I take my hot oil out the back. Well, I brought back another wok. This is a larger size. We're actually going to heat this up now, straight away with our big flame. A lot of heat required for this dish. We're going to fry up our sesame oil for a start, and when it gets nice and hot, we're going to saute some of our other lovely ingredients. You know, this is a very interesting dish because it's actually a hybrid of Chinese and Malaysian cooking. When the Chinese migrants came to Malaysia prior to the 15th century, they brought their very individual culinary styles with them. So you'll find this is an interesting combination of Chinese and Malay cooking. Our oil's nice and hot. Let's add our aspartame powder. Saute that for a second or two and add our ginger. Masses of lovely minced ginger. This is actually quite a spicy dish. Now let's add our green vegetables. I'm going to wok fry my green vegetables now until they go nice and soft. You know, there's one good thing about Asian style cooking. It takes a little time in the initial stages of preparation, but then it all comes together really quickly at the end. Let's add our soy sauce. Like so. Our chili paste, 2 tablespoons. Lovely red chilies. Wonderful aromas wafting up here from the pan. Let's add our lemon juice. Like so. Beautiful sour flavour of lemon juice to heighten the flavours of the fried noodles. I think it's time to add our fried tofu at this stage. Stir them up. Our bean shoots. And our noodles, last but not least. Like so. Now we need to fry our noodles up, get them nice and hot with the rest of the ingredients here for about 3 or 4 minutes. Well, here it is, our fabulous batch of mee goreng. A hot batch of Malaysian style fried noodles with tofu. Mee goreng. I'm going to show you now how to make a lovely Chinese savoury dish. Chinese spring rolls. I'm sure most of you have heard of them. Lovely little puffs of pastry with a delicious filling of savoury wok fried vegetables. I'm going to share that recipe with you now, a very lovely vegetarian version. All these ingredients here are the ingredients for the filling. We've got 2 tablespoons of Chinese sesame oil, 1/4 teaspoon of yellow aspartame powder, a tablespoon of minced fresh ginger. We've got 4 or 5 medium carrots that have been cut into julienne-sized pieces, little matchsticks actually. We've got 2 cups of mung bean shoots, 3½ ounces, about 100 grams of firm tofu that's been crumbled, a tablespoon of Chinese sesame oil, a tablespoon of Chinese chili oil, 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, a tablespoon of brown sugar, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of freshly ground black peppercorns. We've got 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, and over here we've got a big bowl of cabbage. Now there's actually about 6 cups of cabbage here, and this is 1 small Chinese cabbage. I've got a lovely specimen of a Chinese cabbage over here on the bench. This is a real Chinese cabbage. I got this from the fruit shop around the corner, and this is what I used to chop up for our bowl of cabbage filling here. Although this is a large specimen, I had a wee one, a little small one. So this is a Chinese cabbage. If you're ever looking for one, that's what it looks like. We've also got one other interesting ingredient that I'd like to show you here from close up. These are the spices called Chinese 5-spice. Have a close look at these lovely things over here. This is star aniseed, a very exotic spice from China. This is a little star-shaped spice with a wonderful aniseed flavour. Each one of these star objects has a little black shiny seed inside. And this is one of the 5 ingredients in Chinese 5-spice. Another interesting ingredient here is this type of peppercorn. It's called Sichuan peppercorn because it comes from Sichuan state or Sichuan province of China. It has a very unusual appearance when it's on the tree. The tree is a feathery leaved specimen, and these little peppercorns are not as hot as the traditional peppercorns, but they have a very exotic spicy flavour. So for this particular recipe for Chinese 5-spice, I've got here a couple of cinnamon sticks. We've got 2 teaspoons of lovely anise flavoured fennel seeds, although these have a different type of anise flavour to the star anise. We've got 4 star anise seeds, and we've got 2 teaspoons of Sichuan peppercorns and 12 cloves. We've got enough Chinese 5-spice ingredients here to make enough Chinese 5-spice powder, at least for me, for about a year's worth of Chinese cooking. This recipe today calls for 1 pinch. So we're going to put all these now in our spice grinder and buzz them up, as the saying goes. And then we're going to have a huge batch of Chinese 5-spice powder, which I'm going to put in my spice cupboard and use very gradually over the months. Let's give it a blast. Very noisy machine, this. Let's have a peekaboo. Looking good, smelling out of this world. There it is. You wouldn't believe the aroma. It's really indescribable. The fumes are making me feel giddy. Here's our lovely Chinese 5-spice powder with the most amazing aroma. So we'll take this batch over to our spices, and I must remember to only use 1 pinch of this in my recipe, no more. So I think the first thing we're going to do now is to start cooking up our ingredients for our filling. I've had this wok on for a few minutes, so it's nice and hot. Nothing like a hot wok for cooking your vegetables in. The hotter the better. I don't have the benefit of one of those huge burners that usually fire up underneath a wok. I've got this little kitchen stove here, so I've had to heat it up previously, and it's very, very hot. First thing we're going to do is add our Chinese sesame oil. Sesame oil, asafoetida, and some carrots. Let's stir fry our little carrots. Let's add our ginger. And we've got our cabbage over here, which I think we might add at this stage. 6 cups of cabbage. Now it looks like a lot, but of course, as you know, when you cook cabbage, it shrinks enormously. I'm not going to stir fry my cabbage any further, but I'm going to put the lid on top and allow it to steam a little bit before I add the rest of my ingredients. Why don't you come back in about 5 minutes? All right, let's have a look at our cabbage. It's shrinking very nicely, which is what it's supposed to do. I think it's just about time to add the rest of our ingredients. I'm going to add my bean shoots at this point. Stir them in. Nice crispy crunch of bean shoots is always very nice in spring rolls. We've got some crumbled tofu. Now I'm going to add some more ingredients. My Chinese chili oil. Beautiful red colour of the oil is quite astonishing. I've got my soy sauce, a slurp, and we've got a tablespoon of brown sugar. We've got some salt and a little bit of freshly ground black peppercorns, 1/4 teaspoon actually. Stir all that up. Okay, let's allow our veggies to cook up a little more now, and while we're doing that, we're going to add our thickening paste, but we have to make it first. Let's go over here and make some thickening paste. Well, we're going to need half of our cornstarch. Let's put it in a little bowl. The other half we're going to be using for adhering the edges of our spring rolls together, sticking the edges on together. Let's mix up our thickening paste here. Notice my elegant finger being used for the job. Let's take our thickening paste over to the stove and pour it in our filling. In goes the thickening paste. Stir it all up. And the thickening paste, of course, as you've probably guessed, thickens it. It actually takes away all that moisture. Notice there's not a drop of moisture left in there now, or practically none. Now we have our thickened filling. We're going to remove it from our wok and cool it down. Let's rearrange things here a little. Push that over there. Bring in our plate here. Pop our filling on our plate so it can cool down. Now I suppose you're wondering what on earth I'm going to use for my pastry, because I haven't shown you how to make the pastry yet. Well, to be quite honest with you, I'm not going to show you how to make it, because I didn't make any. I actually bought some. I've got some right over here. I always make my pastries, but when it comes to spring rolls, spring roll pastry is a bit of an art, and to be quite honest with you, I haven't yet mastered it, because it's quite a difficult task getting pastry to go as thin as this. This is almost like, I guess you could compare it to a wet Kleenex tissue. Not a very culinary analogy, but I think it describes them very nicely. There's one packet of 30 eggless spring roll wrappers there that I purchased at the corner store. Let's put those over here and set up here for our big spring roll wrapping session. We're going to need a little bit of space, a nice clean board, and we're going to need some oil on the stove. So before I go any further, don't mind me, I'm going to do a little bit of a clean-up. I'm going to take this here, put that there, all that sort of thing. Here's a nice wok of oil. And pop our oil down here on our front burner, turn on our flame, and we're ready to roll. I want to show you in detail here how to make spring rolls. But one thing we'll have to do first is to use the other half of the batch of cornstarch, which we're going to mix up with a little bit of water and make a sealing agent, or a little bit of, I guess you could call it glue, to stick the edges down on our pastry. Take a little bit of water and a little bit of cornstarch and mix them together. This sticky paste is what we're going to use to stick down the corners of our spring rolls, like so. Scrape all that off, and we'll leave that sitting on the side here. Now let's give you a close encounter with a spring roll. Place your pastry like so, with a pointy bit facing towards you. Take a tablespoon of filling. By the way, you'll need a cloth or some paper towels. Let's grab one from under the bench here to keep your fingers nice and dry. You fold over the end like so. So you've got a flat area here. Fold this corner in, fold that corner in, like so, and roll. Roll, 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 until you get to that little point there. Take a little bit of the sticky stuff and roll it over. And there you have one spring roll. Now I'll show you that again, not in slow motion, but I'll show you the whole procedure again. Take the spring roll wrapper, point towards you. A nice spoonful of filling goes there. Wipe the fingers, completely dry. Fold over, fold in the edges. Generally I find I get neater as I go along. And then tuck it in, roll, roll, roll. And so it goes. 30 of the best. I'm going to take these over to the stove now and fry them in our wok of oil. I also have a big machinery here for lifting them out. I have a colander and something sitting underneath the colander. That's all you need. So at this point in time, all we have to do is slip them in, maybe 6 or 8 at a time. Let's go for 6, let's not be too adventurous. I think 6 will do us for a start. Let's very gently hold them under there You'll see when you're cooking your spring rolls that they don't take very long. The important thing is to keep them under the oil so they all cook evenly. That didn't take long at all. What a gorgeous batch of spring rolls. And I have decided to serve them with chili sauce. Here we go. Hot spring rolls and chili sauce. Another great Asian dinner idea. Well, that's it for this edition of Cooking with Kurma. I do hope you'll enjoy preparing these dishes as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. Happy and healthy eating.